Design Notes is a show from Google Design about creative work and what it teaches us. I'm your host, Liam Spradlin. Each episode, I talk with people from unique creative fields to discover what inspires and unites us in our practice.
I think one of the most rewarding parts of doing creative work is watching people experience it, because you're always surprised.
That was Bradley Munkowitz, also known as GMUNK, a designer and director whose work, inspired by psychedelic experiences, touches on everything from sparkling 3D motion to experiential installations, print, and short films. In the interview, we unpack the influence of psychedelics on the creative process, using practical effects to manipulate reality using what we already have, and the importance of remaining critical. Let's get started. All right, we're recording. Welcome to Design Notes.
Thank you. So you didn't get all that ASMR talk we just had? That wasn't recording?
No, but we can get back around to it.
Revisit it later on? Okay,
yeah.
We'll revisit it later on.
So to start out with, I want to know what brought you to your current work, and also how your journey there has influenced the type of things that you're making.
I was always a creative. As a kid, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons and illustrating stories of my characters. And I went to school at Humboldt State in Northern California, State College, didn't have a ton of money. And just it was a playground for psychedelic exploration. Cannabis and psychedelics were a huge part of my college creative explosion. I came from Minneapolis and my whole family moved to San Francisco when I was 18. And so, I kind of found myself in Humboldt County. And just took over the film graphic design departments, and Flash was a huge one back then, just back in the late 90s. It was Flash and 16 millimeter film and Photoshop work and illustration. Traditional illustration was my fine art track, and combining all those into a language. And that was kind of the breakout. And then once I got into the industry, my ethos was just being curious and learning. Started off as kind of a web animator filmmaker, but then that took me into experiential and commercial and design work and UI, UX, installation, sculpture, robotics, projection, anything with light and material. And then as I got older, it was always going more into narrative and themes and telling stories, and telling stories of identity. And I'm really into the metaphysical, and which kind of goes back to the psychedelic foundation in a lot of ways, because psychedelics cause you to question your subconscious, or you question reality in a way, because you lose track of where your body is. You lose track of what you are, and you go where it's just you and your mind on a rocket ship somewhere else for a while. And in that time, you have to learn not to panic, and to just accept that this is all in your subconscious and this is your reality. This is what's inside you. At least that's what I believe. I believe it's not fake. I believe it's actually your subconscious showing you a different reality that you should accept because it's within you. And that has guided my creative path, aesthetically, conceptually. So I struggle with finding the balance of how do I make a living doing commercials? Do I really want to just be making advertisements all my life for brands? That's a really tough gig, So it's what is that balance? To answer your question, I think that it's all about just staying curious and learning and collaborating, working with people that take you outside of your comfort zone so you experiment in new mediums. And that causes a lot of inspiration. Because anytime you start over or start new on anything, it's always the most inspiring phase of that discovery, because it's new.
Right.
And I think sometimes the only way you can get anywhere is through collaboration. Because how else are you going to learn? You can't just go to school for everything, If I didn't have my collaborators, I'd be nowhere. And I know that. And I will openly admit that. That's just the way it is.
Yeah. There's so much in there that I want to unpack. But I want to start with this connection that you drew between your experiences with psychedelics and the aesthetic that you've developed, because it strikes me that the aesthetic of your work is one that is extremely strong and also extremely dynamic. But you use a lot of practical effects in your work. So I want to know how you approach translating these ideas of other realities or manipulating the reality that we have using the tools of our everyday reality.
That's a good question. I'm a big fan of the Mars Ones and the Alex Grays, the psychedelic artists who I love. I mean, Mario, Mars One, is a good friend and my favorite. My favorite style because it's warpy and it has lensing in it. where there's a distortion in his images that I feel is very psychedelic and very camera related, which I'm obsessed with cameras and lenses. But for me, I don't see that stuff. I don't see the traditional psychedelic worlds when I go in. Mine is almost a little bit more science fiction, and it's about light and material and texture and refraction and distortion. And sometimes it's character based. And I don't believe these characters to be aliens or some other interstellar communication. I believe it's my whimsical mind assaulting my brain. There's like things that emerge out, and they're like these ever evolving, transforming kind of tube creatures, kind of like weird, tentacly, lots of eyes, lots of tongues, lots of multiplication and geometric shapes, but they're definitely beings. And they always are tearing my head apart and like opening it up and showing me new portals inside. And it's actually a very cartoony style. And I'm more interested in where that cartoony style exists, which is in this brilliantly detailed, refractive, geometric world. And so my work explores that, because I'm not really a character animator. And someday I will collaborate on the character side and just take a 2-week retreat to Sedona and just hug a rock and do psychedelics for 2 weeks and then be like, okay, this is exactly what we're going to make, But right now I'm really inspired by lensing and lens distortion and fisheyes, and then putting through that system of distortion and lens distortion materiality and illumination, and how all three of those elements work together. And sometimes I'll make graphic design out of this, and I'll make it in 3D so I get the lens distortion in there. And sometimes I'll do it practically, where we'll get a bunch of mirrors and a bunch of lights and a bunch of lasers and get cameras and lenses and fisheyes and just do it in camera. And sometimes I'll do it in CG with a VFX company like The Mill or Frame Store, and we'll say, hey, we're going to go in this light world, sometimes data related, sometimes light related, sometimes it's data as light. I made an Audi commercial that was really psychedelic, and somehow it got approved by Audi Global in Germany. They were all about it, actually, which is great. It's not usually like that. And then that branches out into textural work. My photography is all about texture, and I don't go to an expanse and just take a wide-angle landscape shot of it. I don't do that. I get in it, and I find compositions for either from the air or the ground that are about depth and texture, where I want to feel like I'm submerged in this world and it's a little bit claustrophobic. And then I shoot with medium format digital cameras and just nerd out on the texture and the sharpness and just the detail of everything, which in itself becomes psychedelic, because if you have so much detail and such high fidelity in it, you just lose yourself in it, and then you find yourself kind of tripping, which is the goal. And then there's, the infrared photography, which is taking that even a step further, where you're seeing a light spectrum that you can't even see with your naked eye. So you need a special camera that sees the invisible, sees the unseen. And that in itself is also very psychedelic, because it's that uncovery that you go back to in the deep dives into your subconscious. You're seeing something that can't be seen with a spectral camera, and I love that shit. And then the color palettes and the compositions and the tonal range is all very limited and goes back to almost graphic design in a way.
When you say that Audi was really into the commercial, but it's not always like that, I imagine that maybe it's challenging to bring this aesthetic into everyday reality in a way that is approachable and consumable by other people.
One of the things I've decided in the end, and this isn't an all commercial work, but it's a lot of it, is I'm just going to pitch stuff that I love and that I really want to make and that resonates with that inner being that wants to push this aesthetic. And that's just kind of my style. And if people, that's what fine artists do. Fine artists say, this is my style. If you want my style, you can buy it. And as a commercial artist, I kind of want to do the same thing, where it's, and I'm not only a commercial artist, but in the commercial realm, I want to say like, okay, this is the GMUNK treatment, and it's going to be psychedelic, and it's going to be kind of with that approach. And most of the times I fail. Most of the time they don't buy it. And then I say, okay, well, do I want to do something kind of bright and neutral that isn't really a part of my repertoire. And it's like, well, maybe 10%, 15%, I'll be like, yeah, I need some money. I want to buy a new camera, and we'll do it. And I think with client work, it's all about the client. You can't be too selfish, but in a way, they're hiring you for a reason, so you kind of have to be selfish in a way because they're hiring you for that reason. They want that treatment.
You also describe yourself as, besides being a commercial artist, a designer and a director. And I'm interested, given all of the different things you've done and all the collaborations that you've done through your work, what each of those roles means to you.
Yeah, I consider myself a designer first because it's in my blood. Not like genetically. My dad was an actuary. So he's a mathematician, but he has a very structured mind. And my mom was a wild, creative writer, teacher. So mixing those two together gave me this creative yet structured mind. And when I was in college, I took an oceanography course because I loved the physics of the ocean. I loved waves. I loved the movement. And I thought that it would be very creative. So I took an oceanography course. It was hard for me because you go out in the freezing cold in your boots in the mud and you're collecting crab sediment. And then you bring it back and you study this sediment in the mud looking for crab refuse or whatever, right? And my charts and my diagrams of that research were so structured and so organized and so designed, to hand draw everything, that my teacher was like, dude, you need to just take a graphic design class. This is not normal. No scientist would do this. Like, this is not for you. You need to take a graphic design class. And then I took graphic design in college, and it was literally like one of the worst programs ever. It was like all old school, everything practical and just like hands-on, cutting type out. And it's just like so not where it was going. It was like principles, but it was kind of old school. But out of college, my first job was at a company in London. And I was the only American in a studio of 25. And my two roommates were Danish and Swedish. Basically, it was .com money. I graduated in 2000. So basically, they were putting together some of the best web artists in the world to go work at one company. And somehow I got picked because I was doing really experimental work that was just so different because it was personal. It was almost anti-establishment, psychedelic, but absurdist at the same time. It's like, who would actually put this kind of stuff out? So that's why I think I got selected to be a part of this super team. But the other people in it were some of the world's best Scandinavian, German, Dutch, and English designers. So I went to the studio, and that's where I learned like real shit, like real graphic design from these guys for 2 years, just every day, beat down. And from there, went on to do UI work and tons of grid work. So when you're doing work in Flash, I have a 1 pixel border on my 5 pixel high fonts. It's just like so detailed. And that work and that style has stayed with me forever, where now, if you look at my computer, there's literally nothing on the desktop. I have 50,000 notes documents that are all designed perfectly, typography, underlines, grids. I spent 2.5 years doing really hardcore UI work for feature films, Oblivion and Tron Legacy, and a bunch of others. We just designed the new Top Gun Maverick UI in there. And so, make a long story short, I mean, that design sensibility of grids, typography, organization, beauty, that goes to my closets, that goes to my organization, the way everything is a design. So it's not that I do a ton of design work anymore, but I'm a designer, and I'll always be a designer forever because it's the way I live. And a director is mostly how I make my work now. I'm 43 years old. I'm not as inspired anymore to just like go into Illustrator and smash out a 50-layer gridded out UI, or like go into Photoshop and do like a 50-layer composite of something. So I direct designers, I direct animators, I direct, cinematographers, editors. And so that's how I do my work now. That's my profession. I'm a professional director and creative director, design director, live action director, experiential, interactive director. I talk a lot and I inspire people and I run teams. And, when you're a director, it's a vibe. It's a collaborative energy where you got to get people to buy into your idea and the way you want to execute it. And you have to just inspire people to rally around you to make something. And all of us want to make something. It makes us happy. So many people, as long as you have something inspiring for them to do, they'll get on board. and make something, and you have to let people have a say and a voice. You can't dominate a collaboration. You have to just assist it and cultivate it and nurture it. I'm a chill dude. I don't have any sort of ego. I'm a lover. I'm a collaborator and a stoner. And stoners are kind of chill. We're chill. And there's not a ton of anxiety in stoners or psychedelic warriors. There's not a lot of anxiety. And so I bring a very calming but collaborative, energetic. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah.
Designer and director, and then the Galactic Crusader, the Psychedelic Warrior, that kind of informs my approach.
Do you think that your relationship to the work is different, being a director versus opening up Illustrator and just doing it yourself?
Yes, it does, because it's not as personal, because you didn't make it with your hands, but I realized that. And so as I've been getting older, I've looked at it. Like I said, I come from a design background, so I always like assess and look and study. And so I'm really big on having a website that spans all of my work from the beginning. And I look at the grid and I say, okay, what do I need to do now? What do I do to update the grid? I live by the grid. I'm obsessed with the grid. And so my personal work is hands-on. My photography is hands-on. I'm grading all the photos. I'm going into Photoshop and retouching all that shit. And then I make a lot of psychedelic art. So that's all done in Maya. These are huge prints that are over 4 feet wide by 4 feet tall. They're big. I do them in Maya so I can do the lensing and the camera. So I'm still making stuff. And if a brand wants me to make one of those illustrations, all about it. That's great. But, some hands-on animation for something, I'll outsource that shit. I have a whole crew of collaborators that I work with and stuff. And so I think that sometimes as a director, you are, writing the story or collaborating with a screenplay writer, other treatment writers. It is always the animus, that spark within you that kind of propagates the whole thing. It is yours in a way, but then you just build your team around you to make it with. So I have both. The directorial work I can't do by myself. And to be honest, I'm just posting a new project on my website right now, and I'm looking at it and I don't like it. And it was a huge opportunity, and it was a good budget and a great shoot with a great team. About 85% of the work that I do, I'm not crazy about. And I only see the flaws, and I think about, I really, really study it, and I make notes about what I could do better, what I would change in my approach. Because sometimes when you do work and you have to work fast, you just pick a direction and you go. All hands on deck, and you just go. And it's fast, and it happens in 3 weeks, a month. And usually that direction is picked within a couple days. It's just like, okay, we've chosen to go on this path, all hands on deck, here we go. And sometimes in hindsight, you're like, I should have picked a different direction. I should have changed the edit. I should have done this. I should have done that. And that happens a lot. And my trajectory, my story, my creative story isn't ending now. It's ending in 25 years. And hopefully in 25 years, my work is at a way higher level than it is now. And my work now is at a much higher level than it was 10 years ago. But I'm always going to be improving. I don't think I'm going to plateau and then go back down. It's just an upward climb. And as long as I'm really hard on myself and really rough on the work and never satisfied, I'll get better. And my friends are rough with me too. Like, it's just relentless in the feedback and kind of the questioning, and nobody's defensive. We're all just kind of take it. And it's so important because, like, the second you start loving your work and you're just like, oh, I've done it. Like, what else can I do? This is it. You're finished. Then you plateau, and then you go back down. And it's like, you can't do that. And the more you do this, the longer you do it, the more humble you become. So many people who are young and start out and do something great, and they're like, I'm the shit. I'm the hottest shit. And that's trouble. And you'll always find that, like, the best people are always the most humble because they know where they're going. Like, they know where the end game is, and they're nowhere near where they want to go.
Yeah. And like we were discussing before the interview, there's a certain level of discomfort in creative work that becomes productive and pushes you forward like that.
I think you need to be uncomfortable constantly. And that's why, for me personally, I'm always throwing myself in new industries where I don't know anything. I know a little bit, and I collaborate with people, and I go in there and I don't know shit. And I just learn, and I'm totally uncomfortable. like intensely uncomfortable, but I don't show it. I go in there as confident as could be, just faking it, just completely faking it. And it's wild that you can do that. But that's the only way to get yourself an opportunity. Like everything is about the opportunity. As long as you're not over-promising, that's the key. You can't over-promise, but you can kind of fake that you're comfortable. So you stand as a leader, even if you're uncomfortable, kind of just fake that. And that's okay. But you can't promise the world and then default on the promises. That's the strategy part. And that's where the producers come in. That's where the producers come in and say, okay, this is what we're going to promise. This is how much it's going to cost. I'm terrible at that shit. But I think once you're comfortable and you slow down and you go through the motions of repetition, it's bad. It's over. Everything becomes repetitive and you're kind of doing the same things every day, talking to the same people, doing the same shit, hiding behind meetings, where your day is just meetings and phone calls and you don't do any work whatsoever until 5 or 6 o'clock. And that just becomes the reality. You need to change that shit. You need to change that shit and get other people to handle your calls and say, look, I'm a creative, man. I'm not just like, because if you just talk and talk and talk on calls, but you don't actually put pen to paper and be creative, you'll lose it. You'll lose the spark. So for me, like my lifestyle as a freelancer, because you're always uncomfortable. There's no repetition whatsoever. Every day is different. You're in different places, doing different things, different locales, and there's just constant stimulation from everywhere, but that makes you uncomfortable. And then, as a freelancer, you're able to collaborate with whomever you want as well, whenever you want. There's nobody managing your time but yourself, which is kind of how it needs to be. At least for me, I'll freak out if someone else is managing my time, like time is literally one of your most valuable assets and how you structure your time. And you can't just like flip a switch and I'm creative now, like this is my time to be creative. I have 2 hours, ready, set, go. Ideas happen in the most unexpected places. A lot of my ideas come in the shower. A lot of my ideas come in the treadmill, when I'm just drawing under a tree, listening to music and walking outside. Rarely does an idea come from the computer. I'll look at reference and take something from it, but like what it means and what it's trying to say and like how it fits into the bigger picture, that all happens outside of the computer, man. That doesn't happen at my standing desk with my headphones on. It has to happen in a dinner conversation, drawing on a napkin, on a hike. For some reason, water and me, like the shower is always the spark. For, swimming, I love baths, dunking in the bath and just like thinking, looking out the window,
Shifting back to some of the specifics of your work, it seems like a lot of your work crosses these axes of different types of experiences. You have audiovisual pieces that I think are mainly consumed on a screen and speakers and things like that. And you also have experiential pieces that involve like physical spaces. I'm interested in what each of those things uniquely affords to the viewer or the visitor in terms of experience.
I think one of the most rewarding parts of doing creative work is watching people experience it, because you're always surprised. There's always an unexpected reaction or engagement. And experiential work for me is kind of my favorite type of work right now because of that. You do work for the television, you make a commercial on TV, someone's just going to sit on their fucking couch and not want to watch it. There's no engagement. People want to skip the commercials, fast forward on their DVR, People watch something on YouTube on their computer with their headphones, they're half there. They're like kind of not focused on it. There's someone in their ear. Their tea just arrived at the table. It's just like there's always shit going on. They're in a studio. Someone's tapping their shoulder. There's a dog sleeping at their feet. There's never 100% engagement. What I love about, for instance, VR is you put that headset on, you're gone. There is nothing else that matters. There's no phone. There's nobody talking to you. You are in that world. That's full immersion. I love that shit, right? And I wish that, I really hope that VR finds its groove, because it's fucking cool. It's just like you take off the headset after you've done something. And you're like, where did I just go? It's very much like a psychedelic experience in a way. It's like I'm smoking DMT or something. You just lose yourself. So experiential work like that, when there's scale and immersion and storytelling within an environment where you don't care about distractions, you're just in it. like immersive sculpture. That's what we're doing with the robot stuff, for instance, like with Telestron. That's like immersive sculpture, where you go into a room and there's 15-foot tall robots swinging lights and shadows and material and sound and reflections. And the only thing you really want to do is watch it and take pictures of it. The only two things you're thinking about is like, holy fuck, this thing's huge and loud. Is it going to kill me? What are they doing? What is the meaning behind this? What are they communicating? How am I a part of it? Are they going to kill me? That's all you're thinking about.
Just to be clear, are they going to kill me?
They're not.
Yeah.
They're totally not interested in killing anybody. They're interested in making beauty and sculpture, but owning a space, right? And Box, which was a projection mapping piece, its only purpose was to create illusions where you see that and you're like, what the fuck is happening? Like, how is this happening? I don't understand how this is happening. This is an illusion of depth where there is no depth. That's why we're calling it Box, because there's a flat screen and all of a sudden it's a box with all sorts of shit going on inside the box. And so it's an illusion. And when you see an illusion, you are engaged, you're immersed, and you're immersed in that illusion, trying to figure out how it happens. Like you see a magic trick, same thing. It's like, how the fuck did you do that? You have my attention. And I saw a speech recently that was really interesting about engagement and attention, where if something's wrong, this dude gave a speech, his name's Alex Cornell, and he basically gave a speech where he recorded a 45-minute video of him talking to himself. So it's all queued up, and he's conversing with himself about the concept of an idea, like this, the inception of an idea. And he intentionally, in this recording, throws the timing off a little bit, so you realize that there was a mistake, so you engage more, but he did it intentionally, which is so fucking tight. Like, it's so cool. And it worked. And I was like, oh, Alex, on that one part, you were a little, it took a little long to respond to yourself. And he's like, oh yeah, I did that intentionally. And I was just like, man, but that's the kind of thing, right? You find out what people pay attention to and you use it to your advantage to get people more engaged. So that's what I love about experiential work, is it takes you off the screen. And there can be screens, but it's in a dynamic environment. And so I've been thinking long and hard, man, about how do I make a living as a creative? Like, what's the best way to do this? Is it about making a Maytag commercial for refrigerators with a funny guy and a dog on a floor? Is that my path? Working with ad agencies who are going to change everything and I'm going to get pissed off? Or is it about creating experiences where people can go in and I know that there's an engagement there, that there's an appreciation and an immersion and a curiosity to the work, that they can actually move through it? And the answer actually is both. I do want to make the commercials because I love live action. I love filmmaking. I love telling stories. I love shooting. I love cameras, lensing. And that's why I work in so many different disciplines, because I love a lot of different things. I love making psychedelic prints because I feel like it's personal. I feel like it's things that I see or that I feel that I need to get out. And then I print them giant, large format printing, hang them on a wall and let people look at them. And then they kind of have a piece of my mind and it feels personal. And it feels like I have a personal connection with them. That's experiential. Or the photography is personal because it's a story. It's a memory. Every photo that you take is a memory because you remember exactly where you were, how you felt. Was the backpack heavy? Was it cold? Was I thirsty? What was the feeling like when I saw this vista in Thorsmork in Iceland? And like, how did that feel when I was shooting it? And what was I thinking about? And then you get the photo back. It's such an experience for yourself. So I don't know. I don't have the answer for like, what is the secret for being a successful creative, other than just, you got to stay on it. You got to be kind of relentless in your pursuit. And what you're pursuing is a lot of different things. It's a lot of learning. It's a lot of personal expression. It's a lot of engagement with your audience. It's a lot of satisfaction with improvement, with growth. And you have to pursue all of that all the time. And if you stop pursuing that and if you get comfortable, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose that fire. And then you're not going to succeed.
Yeah. I think that's a really good note to close on.
Oh, wow. We're done. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that was good.
Thank you again for joining me.
Yeah. No problem.
Subscribe to Design Notes and stay tuned for a special series of episodes with the winners of this year's Material Design Awards. I sat down with the winning teams to learn what goes into crafting an award-winning experience and how an app can feel like a friend. You can subscribe to Design Notes on Google Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review on iTunes and listen for a shout out in the next episode, or let us know how we're doing with an email to design@google.com. Thanks for listening.